Hi, I'm Vicky. Over the next few videos, I'm going to show you how I make my first ever corset body using an overbust corset pattern as my starting point. To start the process of making this corseted playsuit, I've just drafted my pattern, which I've kept a copy of, and I've made a mock-up just at the top part of the corset, and I want to get this fitted first, and then I can measure and draft the pattern for the bottom half that will turn this into a playsuit. So for this mock-up, what I've done is I've used a layer of calico, a layer of some thick satin scraps that I had, and I've just boned it on the seams with spiral steel boning, and I've put some straight steel boning down the back and made some holes so I can lace it up. And then I'm going to try this on Jazida and work out what changes we need to do from there. Then once I've worked that out, I'll mark all the changes on my pattern here and then start drafting the bottom half. So this is the first calico on Jazida. So this wrinkle at the front will be gone as soon as we've got all the boning in there. That will give it a little bit more support. So there's only a couple of minor changes I'm going to make at this stage. So I'm going to bring the front in just a little bit, just to give that extra bit of cleavage. The length's really good. I'm just going to bring it in. You can see it's just sticking out a tiny bit at the bottom there. So I'm just going to add a really, really slight curve at the bottom. And then if you can turn around for me. So we've got quite a narrow gap at the back. So because we're doing a bodysuit, I need this to touch at the bottom, because then that will become the centre back seam that goes round and under the butt. So I'm actually going to do this so the opening is in a slight V at the back. So I just need to add a fraction more at the back and take a fraction more off at the top to get that V shape to go into the seam at the bottom. But other than that, I'm really happy with the fit for a first calico. So next I'm going to take the measurements I need and we'll do another toile, but with the bottom part of the bodysuit on it. I've now marked the changes from fitting the first toile onto my corset pattern. So I've taken this seam in 1/4 of an inch just to help make it that little bit tighter around the bust, and I've also curved it in under the bust a little more just to help with that tightness and help to get the cleavage that we want. And I've taken it in that just tiny bit at the bottom of the side of the hip as well. I've actually, after looking at the pictures, I've decided just to bring it out a tiny bit at the side back as well. And I've just dropped the centre back a bit, because where it was coming around it looked like it was just curving up a bit there. So I think that's going to be a much nicer shape. Then at the centre back, because we need the seam to join from sort of the bum downwards, I've done it so it should touch from this point. And then it's just going to curve out in a V shape, which will give us the gap we need to be able to pull it nice and tight. Then from the bottom of the original corset pattern, using the measurements I took when Jazida had it on, I've now drafted what I think will work to make it into the corset body. So I've brought it down at the centre front and the centre back. Now I measured that it was 18 inches from front to back from the bottom of the corset toile. So I've actually split that unevenly, because we need to get the seam central. We need slightly more at the back to go over her bum, whereas the front comes straight down. Then at the back I've drafted it so it's the same height at the side of the hip, but then I've curved it down to get coverage over her bum and her hip, and then coming down the back. And then at the front I've got it curved up, and then it comes down into this part. So it looks kind of right to me, but I think I'm going to need to tweak it when she tries it on. Next I'm going to make another toile using the same method as I used for the first one, which is calico basted to this strong satin that I've got. This time I'm going to put more boning in it though, because I want some boning in the front. So I'm going to put some spiral steel boning in the front, because we got quite a big crease last time. And then with the new shape of the pattern, I'm going to bone this one all the way to the bottom, and I'm going to stop the boning at the same height at the centre back. And then at the front I'm going to stop the boning at the original height of the original corset pattern. If that comes too long, it's just going to mean that she won't be able to sit down in it. So again, I'm doing this from guesswork, so once she tries the toile on, I'll be able to make alterations and work out exactly where I need boning and exactly how far it needs to come down as well. So hopefully this will work well for our next toile fitting, and I will make any more adjustments to the pattern from there. Now I've got it cut out, I've realised that this part's far too wide, and I'd added on seam allowance as well, which I obviously don't need, because this will be the edge of the corset and it will be bias binding to finish it. So I've just marked a different line here. So I'm going to cut the centre front to that new line. I'll match the back as well, and then I'll just mark the changes on my pattern pieces. So this is the next fitting with the second toile. We're really happy with how it's sitting at the top. I just need to bring it in just a tiny bit more just to hold the bust together. So we just need to do some tweaking around here. It was too long here, so I need to shorten it around the bottom here. And then if you can turn around for me. I've had to take it in quite a bit at the back here. It was too big all across the back. And I need to stop the boning just that little bit shorter because it's just sticking out at the bottom there. So I'm going to stop the boning here, shorten these panels, and then just shorten this whole part. And then we've decided that we're going to use some elastic at the very bottom and hook and eyes, probably from a bra, just to make it easier to get on and off. And we're probably going to add a zip at the centre front as well. I just did a slight tweak at the back as well, so I just dropped that centre back part down a little bit and it's giving a much nicer line at the back. And I think I'm just going to make the gap just a tiny bit wider, just so we've got a little bit more to pull in if we need to. Overall, I'm really happy with this as the first sort of draft of the actual bodysuit itself. So I'm going to do just these little alterations to the bottom and then we'll try it on again. So I've made the pattern adjustments based on the second toile fitting. Other than the adjustments to the pattern itself, we've also decided to add a zip at the centre front. So I have to adjust the pattern to add a seam allowance centre front. And we've also adjusted the pattern to add a stretchy part with hooks at the bottom, just to make it easier to put on and off. And hopefully the stretch will just make the fit a little bit better. So I've bought this bra, which I'm going to cut the back off, which has 3 hooks, which can be in 3 different positions, which will just give us that little bit of stretch and that little bit of adjustability to hopefully make the fit a little bit better. I picked this one it's really stretchy, but it's quite a nice, the net on it's not too sheer. So hopefully this will work really well. So I'm going to cut it probably to just past where those straps are. I'll take the hardware off here and I'm going to use that. I'll keep the cups and use them in another project some other time. And I'll keep the straps too, they always come in handy. So at the centre front, I've added the seam allowance where the zip's going to go. I've taken it in a tiny bit here. You can see where I pinned on the toile. It just needed to be a bit tight around the bust. And looking at the pictures, the side panels were just a tiny bit too wide. So I've just taken that side seam in a little bit there as well. And then at the bottom, I've made the adjustments to the height here that's coming up over the leg. I've shortened it here to allow for attaching the elasticated part with the hooks. And then you can see that's how much we pinned it up when Jazida tried it on at the front. So we had to narrow it quite a lot there and then shorten it up over the hips. So that was my original lines from the last pattern. This is my new line here, and that's the seam allowance. So that's half of our width at the front once it's all together. Then for the back, I needed to just make it slightly wider at the centre back top, just so we had a little bit more lacing width to pull in. And then I had to take it in a lot. You can see where I pinned it at the side back seam here. So we had to take it in quite a lot there and quite a lot here. And I've also narrowed it 1/2 inch centre back to allow for this part that we took in as well. I need to shorten the boning at the centre back too. This boning was just sat too low and it was sticking out. So I'm going to stop the boning here. With the centre front zip, it shouldn't be a problem to get on. I was worried that if the boning was any shorter at the back, it would be too hard to put on. But with the zip, that won't be an issue. So it'll be joined to there and then the lacing will start here. Looking at how I pinned it, so I actually pinned it quite a lot shorter here, but I like this length here. So I drew it shorter first, but I've decided just to lengthen it again and we'll see how that goes. But I can always cut it shorter when I cut the real thing. I'm hoping this will be the final fitting. And again, I've cut the centre back shorter to allow for adding the elasticated hook part on there. So now I'm happy with my pattern. I'm going to cut this pattern out and I'm going to make another toile. So I'm going to make it exactly the same way. I'm going to base my calico onto this satin that I have, and then I'll show you how I assemble and bow my toiles. I've got all the pieces for my new toile cut out now. So I've got the layer of satin basted onto the layer of calico for each one. When you're making a toile, you need to pick fabrics that don't have any stretch to them. I keep, these are offcuts from something else I made, this satin, so I've kept this to one side because it's great for doing toiles from. You can look in charity shops for some old sort of nice sheets if they're a good thick cotton or a good thick polyester that you can use with no stretch in. Whichever fabrics you choose, you want it to have absolutely no stretch horizontally. So once I've got my two layers basted together, I then join them right sides together and stitch my seam allowance, and then I stitch it open, so towards the back. So this is my side seam on here. So I stitch my seam allowance, then top stitch it open, and then I stitch my boning channel in the width I need for the boning that I'm going to use. So it looks pretty neat on the outside. On the inside it's pretty ugly because you can see all of the seam allowance there, but it doesn't matter because it's strong enough to try on and see if the fit's right. Then I insert my bones in between the satin and the calico layers, and I stitch them into place at each end. If you just put them in and you don't stitch them into place, the fabric can gather up along them, and then you won't get a true idea of how the fit is of the garment you're trying on, the corset you're trying on. The other thing I do is I top stitch all around the front as well, to stop any bits that are just on the bias, like here and here, from stretching, because again that will not give you a true idea of what the fit is like. So for this one I'm probably going to add even more boning down the sides just to really get that fit absolutely spot on, get it to sit like the final corset will fit. Making toiles is a bit of work, but it's so worth it to get the fit absolutely right, because once you've made the corset they're really hard to alter. So get it right at the toile and the fitting stage, and then, you know, once you make your final garment it's going to be absolutely perfect. I'm going to go ahead and make up this toile in exactly the same way I did that. I might put a bit of extra boning in the middle of each panel just to be sure, and I'm going to put the zip in the centre front, and then I'm going to use the elasticated hooks and eyes from the back of the bra. I'm going to cut them off and put them at the bottom just to make sure the fit's going to be right with those as well. So this is my finished toile all sewn up. So I've got my zip in the centre front, which opens really low, so it should be really easy for Jazida to get it off on stage. I've got the hook and eye fastening with that little bit of stretch at the bottom, so hopefully that will make the fit better. So you can see that's the front and then the back. So I've shortened that boning a lot from the last fitting, so the back doesn't open much, but because we've got the zip in the front now it should be okay to get on, and then the lacing is just going to give it that little bit of tightness that we need to cinch it in. So that's the bum at the back now. It's a lot less fabric than the last fitting, so hopefully that's going to fit a lot better. So to do the centre back of my toiles, I just stitch the seam allowance back underneath, stitch a line to put my straight steel boning in, then I stitch another line and just punch some holes with my awl through all the layers, and that's what I put the lacing through, rather than wasting some eyelets or grommets to do this part with. In the past I have had strips with grommets on that I've just sewn on the back of toiles just to make lacing a bit easier, but all the ones I've used have disintegrated at the minute, so I could do with making some new ones, but this method works just as well. So this is the third toile on Jazida. So the fit is absolutely spot on now, so there's just a couple of really minor changes. So I'm just going to bring the shape here just a tiny bit longer, so I've just stitched some white fabric in there so I know where to extend my pattern. But the fit over the bust and the hips is exactly how we want it. The zip is working really well, and if you can turn around for me. And then the fit at the back and over the bum is really good. The only thing I had to do was just shorten the elastic and hook parts a little bit. They were just a tiny bit too long. Where we've got the wrinkles at the waist here, that will all be gone once we've got all the layers of the fabric and once I've got some more boning in there as well. And it's just lumping up a tiny bit here at the back, so I think I just need to put a slight curve in that seam and maybe just bring the boning just a tiny bit longer as well. But it's really minor changes, so I'm happy to go ahead and make it in the right fabric now. So I'll be back in the next video to show you how I make the real thing.